Beyond the Rings is back. Welcome in. I'm your host, Gabby Ducharme. This week, I am joined by Basketball Hall of Famer and broadcaster, Meyers Drysdale. She is the first ever woman to sign an NBA contract with the Indiana Pacers, the first woman to earn an athletic scholarship from UCLA, and she played for the inaugural United States Olympic women's basketball team in 1976. Drysdale reflects on her own Olympic journey, spanning more than 40 years, as a player and broadcaster. Welcome back into Beyond the Rings. I'm your host, Gabrielle Ducharme, and of course, I am joined here today by basketball royalty Meyers Drysdale, Basketball Hall of Famer and current broadcaster. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on today and to join us during this very tumultuous time.
Well, my pleasure, and certainly wishing everybody a lot of safety and staying healthy. And I know this is a difficult time for a lot of people, but this has been a perfect, I think, avenue for a lot of people to stay connected.
I want to go back a little bit to the young woman that you were in high school. What was the journey to officially making that Olympic team? Because that was also a history-making Olympic team in that you guys were the first women's team essentially to be able to compete in the Olympics, right? For USA basketball and just for basketball in general. It was really kind of a trailblazing year that year. But what was the specific journey for you to get on that Olympic team or to get on the Pan American team?
I really believe that myself and women's basketball in general does not get the exposure that it did back in the 70s if I don't go to UCLA.
Right.
And I go to UCLA on a scholarship. I was the first woman to receive a full athletic scholarship. And my brother David was playing at UCLA for Coach John Wooden. His roommate at the time, when he was a junior, I believe, his roommate was Kenny Washington. And Kenny Washington had been on Coach Wooden's two championship teams in 64 and 65.
Right.
And Kenny was going to be the women's basketball coach. So they came home one weekend, and Title IX had passed in 1972. So in 1974, I was a senior in high school. And, they came home one weekend and said, hey, how would you like to come to UCLA on a basketball scholarship? So that's basically how that happened, unlike how things are today for young women and young men, how they're recruited. But during that time, I was always playing against the boys, growing up on the playgrounds and playing basketball and other sports also. But I had every intention of playing on the boys' high school team my senior year. And I had played during the summer league on the boys' team. And so, as I said, I had planned on playing during this regular school year. But, when you're in high school, you're emotionally changing, you're physically changing, and mentally. And so a lot of people said a lot of things and I was intimidated by it. And so in high school, I did not go out for the boys team. But what I found out too, Gabrielle, that it opened up another door for me, and that was USA basketball. Billy Moore was at Cal State Fullerton coaching, but GL eventually ended up becoming the Olympic coach in 1976. And then also my senior year at UCLA, she came over and coached, and that was the year we won the championship in 78. So a lot of tie-ins with different people that people knew who I was. And so when I didn't make the boys team my senior year in high school, and there was this tryout for USA basketball, you had to have an invite. But I got an invite because people knew who I was. And I ended up making that team. I don't think I started on that team, but just the fact that I made that team and to be a part of where USA basketball, women's basketball was going. And as I said, it'd been around, world championships and Pan Am games since the 50s for women. So I saw a lot of these women play in the 60s and 70s that my sister played against.
When you found out you were going to represent the United States of America on the international level, what went through your mind, if you can recall, what went through your mind initially when you did hear that news?
But usually in basketball, especially men's basketball, they were taking, you're a college senior, basically. And you were going to be somebody that was going into the NBA. If you look at those teams in the Olympics for men's basketball. And the same thing with women's basketball. We were basically 20, 21, 22 years old. And we'd only been together for like two and a half months. So making the Olympic team was huge. Certainly I was excited. I had been on several teams representing the United States. I was young enough, and I think I started on that team, on that Olympic team, and so there was a lot of great pride. And so going from there, 1980, I wanted to go to the 1980 Olympics. I had not gotten my degree from UCLA as of yet because I was playing USA basketball. I did not take a full load all the time going to UCLA, which was on the quarter system. And so I was drafted by the WBL, which was the very first women's pro league. I was the #1 draft pick. I did not go because I wanted to stay amateur for the 1980 Olympics. And then when I got the offer of the Indiana Pacers, to try out in the NBA, and my brother David was already playing in the NBA with the Milwaukee Bucks. I'd been around basketball my whole life. So as much as I wanted to represent my country again in the 1980 Olympics, it was a very difficult decision for me. Even though I had bypassed the WBL, this was an opportunity of a lifetime. And I chose to go through the tryout and become a pro. And so I lost that amateur status to represent my country in the 1980 Olympics. And so it was very difficult to hear afterwards, probably a week later after I had made my decision, our president, Jimmy Carter, decided to boycott the 1980 Olympics. Right. And so all these Americans that I knew, and certainly women that were on that basketball team, that they were going to lose their chance, their one chance, an opportunity to represent their country, because we were not going to go to the Soviet Union and compete as a country. And so I understand athletes that have not been able to compete in the Olympics. I've broadcasted 6 Olympic Games and being around the Olympians of today. But in 1976, with it being the first year of women's basketball, there were only 6 teams competing, and the Soviet Union had dominated. They'd been together 10 to 15 years, and their center was their starting front line was 6'6", because their starting center was 7 foot. And Uliana Semenova was like, you could compare her to Shaq today. We won silver, and I still to this day believe that how we played as a team, and it was a round robin. It wasn't where you played for a gold medal game. Right. And but winning that silver medal to me still stands for a lot of pride and competitive greatness that we all had and brought to the table. So yeah, we didn't win gold. We've won gold. We won gold at the World Championships. We won gold at the Pan Ams. We won gold a lot of different places.
The 1980 Olympics, you had to make that tough decision before Jimmy Carter decided to boycott those Olympic Games. It feels like it's almost history repeating itself right now, right? Because there's another generation of athletes now who were training for 2020, and now their Olympic dream got postponed.
With this Olympics being postponed, and certainly because of this pandemic, it was not a political decision, right, which a lot of boycotts in the Olympics have happened over the course of centuries with countries because of politics. And but this is a pandemic. And it affects athletes, whereas in the others where your country may have boycotted, you could still train, you could still work out, you could still even get citizenship in another country and represent another country as an athlete.
You actually mentioned that you have broadcasted 6 Olympic Games now, like to date. Were you on track to broadcast the Olympic Games in 2021 as well?
No, not right now. And, this NBC has been great. I did the 84 Olympic Games, which was the first time they broadcast the women's basketball. In 88, we won gold, and Kay Yao was the head coach there. 84, Pat Summitt was the coach. But I should say, so 80, we did not, we boycotted. So 84 was the first gold that we won. And I was able to broadcast that for ABC and working with Keith Jackson, which was a thrill. And then in 2000, NBC called me up and I did the next 5 Olympics. So, NBC's been great. I had a great run with them, and sometimes, things change. And so I think that they were going in a different direction, and but who knows, I always love USA basketball. My heart will always be there with them, supporting them. I love telling the stories of the history of women's basketball and the stories of the players that are on that team, and how, because I think a lot of times, even during the WNBA season, that a lot of people don't get to hear about that kid
When you look at your career as a player versus your career as a broadcaster, how do you compare those two? Like, how would you break that down for someone who hasn't experienced either one? You've experienced both of them now.
That's a great question. I mean, I never looked at it that way. I just, as I said, I've been in the right place at the right time, and I've had some wonderful people in my life kind of take me under their wing and direct me in different places. And with the broadcasting, didn't know that I would be a broadcaster, but took a class at UCLA. The professor really made an impact on me, and there were certain people in Los Angeles that said, okay, we'll try, because a lot of women were not broadcasting in sports at that time. ESPN did not exist when I went to college. And so sports was very limited. And, I just hustled for jobs. And when the doors were open, I tried to take advantage of it, had a lot of doors closed in my face. I would have loved to have continued playing. I did play in the WBL for a year and was MVP, but also know too that, some things change. Your journey changes, and you have to be willing to accept and go forward in a different path sometimes. And that I've been fortunate because of the people that have helped me along the way.
Is there a specific word or phrase that you're leaning on during this very tumultuous time in history that has kind of been a guiding light for you to come out the other side of this pandemic stronger than when you entered?
I just live each day as your masterpiece. I mean, you got to wake up every day, and it's not always easy, but take advantage of this opportunity. To me, it is an opportunity. Don't look back and say woulda, shoulda, coulda. And there's things that you can do, and things that everybody's learning new things to do. And whether it is reading a book or coloring or playing cards, I mean, just something simple as that, and spending time with family and friends. But just life is short, and take it like a friend of mine, Frank Layden, who used to coach the Utah Jazz. He said, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. So whatever you make of it is the end.